Picture this. 6 in the morning and I'm parked in my Civic outside Marcus's place like some kind of private investigator. But before you judge me, let me explain why I'm actually sitting here. This isn't about being unhinged or possessive. This is about a woman who's been driven to the edge by a spouse who believes he can dictate every single moment of my existence. Oh, and real quick, if you're enjoying this story so far, go ahead and smash that like button. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. 4 months back, Daniel found out about my connection with Marcus, and rather than taking a hard look at himself and wondering why his wife had to seek emotional fulfillment elsewhere, he transformed into this paranoid shell of the man I married. My husband has always been the intense type. You know the kind, memorizes every single word of every conversation and dissects the tiniest details until there's nothing left. But lately, whispers. He's morphed into some kind of surveillance specialist who acts like I'm public enemy number one. The really twisted part? His suffocating approach is precisely what pushed me toward Marcus initially. While Daniel was busy being this oppressive force in our home, constantly interrogating me about my whereabouts and who I'd spoken to, Marcus actually listened. He made me feel noticed and wanted in ways I hadn't experienced in forever. Marcus recognized that a woman requires room to exist, needs to feel valued for her authentic self, not perpetually judged for every minor choice she makes. Sure, I promised Daniel I'd stop talking to Marcus after the discovery, but that was purely to create some breathing room for myself. A woman deserves the right to maintain friendships, and if those friendships happen to include someone who genuinely appreciates her wit and attractiveness, then that's honestly nobody's concern but her own. I'd been erasing our messages from my phone because I anticipated Daniel would search through it. The man has absolutely zero concept of boundaries, but apparently he'd been monitoring my tablet like some digital spy. Sarcastically, the reality that he's been tracking me just demonstrates how little faith he has in me, which honestly makes me wonder if this relationship ever had a solid foundation to start with. What kind of person needs to constantly inspect his wife's electronics? Weak one, that's the answer. Someone who lacks enough confidence in himself to trust that he can satisfy his woman. I observe Marcus's entrance, knowing he departs for the office around 7:30. His spouse, Rebecca, typically takes their vehicle first to transport the children to childcare, which means Marcus will be heading to the transit stop on foot. That's my window. We need to discuss what the future holds because I refuse to allow Daniel to control the direction of my existence anymore. The reality is, Marcus and I share something authentic. It's not merely some casual thing like Daniel wants everyone to think. We've spent months discussing how miserable we both are in our relationships, how we discovered something in each other that had been absent. Marcus confided that his wife doesn't get him, that she's turned into this critical presence who exclusively focuses on expenses and timetables. Whispers. Ring any bells? When Marcus's garage door lifts and Rebecca reverses their crossover, I feel my pulse accelerating. This is the moment. I hold back until she's disappeared down the road before stepping from my vehicle and approaching their residence. Marcus emerges at the entrance precisely when I predicted, carrying his work bag, glancing around anxiously before stepping onto the pavement. "Marcus," I call out, and he stops dead like he's witnessed an apparition. "Victoria, what on earth are you doing here?" His tone is unsteady, and I notice him scanning the area to confirm none of his neighbors are observing. "We need to discuss us, about where things go from here." Short pause. He shakes his head, retreating from me. "There isn't an us anymore. I explained that to you yesterday during our call. You've told me plenty of things over these past months too, about departing from your wife, about how what we share is extraordinary." Whispers. "Were all of those just empty words?" "Lower your voice," he hisses, seizing my arm and dragging me to the side of his residence where we're concealed from the road. "Listen, the situation became messy. Your husband contacted me." My insides drop. "He did what?" "Daniel phoned me yesterday. He's aware of everything. The messages, the encounters, all of it. He's threatening to inform Rebecca if I don't terminate things with you entirely. The treachery cuts more profoundly than anything Daniel has ever inflicted on me." So that's your decision? You're simply going to discard everything we created because my husband issued some warnings? Created? Marcus laughs, but there's zero amusement in it. Victoria, we were conducting an affair. We weren't creating anything besides a disaster. Don't you dare diminish what we experienced. You chased me just as aggressively as I chased you. You're the one who claimed your marriage was finished, that you were only remaining for the children. I never stated I was going to abandon my wife. You made that assumption. The manipulation is beyond belief. I can feel my face burning with fury. Are you serious right now? What about all those occasions you discussed us finding our own apartment? What about when you said you were in love with me? I got swept up in the moment. We both did. But it's finished now. That's when he delivers the revelation that makes my entire reality spin sideways. I already disclosed everything to your husband, Victoria. About the motel encounters on Wednesdays when you claimed you were shopping, the calls you've been placing from the supermarket area, the messages you assumed you erased. He extracts a folder, an actual folder, like he's submitting evidence in a courtroom, and begins reciting dates and timestamps. The shame hits me like a physical assault. Not only did Marcus betray me, but he provided Daniel with weapons to deploy against me in ways I can't even fathom yet. Marcus genuinely had the audacity to share intimate details about our private moments, things that were meant to remain exclusively between us. You coward, I whisper. You absolute spineless traitor. I'm safeguarding my family. Something you ought to have considered before initiating this. I initiated this. You're the one who kept messaging me, who proposed we meet for coffee initially. You're the one who made the first move in your vehicle. But he's already retreating, heading toward the transit stop without a backward glance. I remain there observing him depart, feeling like the earth has collapsed beneath my feet. This person who made me feel vibrant again, who I believed genuinely cared, just exposed himself to be as pathetic and self-centered as every other man I've encountered. The journey home is a haze of anger and terror. If Marcus confessed everything to Daniel, then I'm completely unprepared for what awaits me. Daniel's always been the type who requires complete information before executing any strategy, and now he possesses it. The prospect of confronting him with this new knowledge makes my skin prickle. When I arrive at our driveway, I observe Daniel through the kitchen window preparing breakfast for Sophia and Ethan like it's an ordinary morning. "How was your morning exercise?" he inquires when I enter, not glancing up from the pancakes he's preparing. "Fine," I fabricate, pouring a cup of coffee and attempting to decipher his expression for any indication of what Marcus revealed. "Excellent. We have that marriage counseling appointment at noon today. I'm anticipating it." There's something in his inflection that makes my stomach tighten, but I can't identify exactly what. Daniel's always been difficult to interpret when he's strategizing something, and presently he feels like a wound spring prepared to snap. The remainder of the morning unfolds in this bizarre atmosphere of artificial normalcy. I assist getting the children ready for school, engage in casual conversation about weekend activities, pretend like my world isn't about to detonate. But I can sense Daniel observing me, examining my responses to everything he mentions. When we reach our therapist's office that afternoon, I'm anticipating our standard protocol, where Sandra facilitates us through communication techniques, and we discuss reconstructing confidence. Instead, the instant we're seated, Daniel begins speaking. "I experienced an enlightening conversation yesterday," he starts, and my heart begins pounding in my chest. "Oh," I attempt to maintain my tone nonchalant, but even I detect the tremor in it. "Yes, I spoke with Marcus. You know, your affair partner." The manner he states it so matter-of-factly and composed is somehow more devastating than if he'd been yelling. I can sense Sandra's gaze on me, anticipating my reaction. I'm not certain what you believe you understand, but I understand everything, Victoria. The motel encounters on Wednesdays when you claimed you were shopping, the calls you've been placing from the supermarket area, the messages you assumed you erased. He extracts a folder, an actual folder like he's submitting evidence in a courtroom, and begins reciting dates and timestamps. My initial reaction is to reject everything, but the extent of information he possesses is staggering. April 20th, Riverside Inn, room 314. April 27th, coffee at that establishment downtown, then back to his vehicle for an hour. May 8th, you informed me you were having lunch with your sister, but your device was connecting to cell towers near his workplace. How did you? I employed someone to investigate after I discovered the first deleted message, sarcastically, but Marcus saved me some expense yesterday by validating everything I suspected. The betrayal from Marcus stings all over again, but what truly infuriates me is how self-satisfied Daniel appears as he presents his evidence like he's some kind of district attorney. He's always been the type who requires being correct about everything, who can't simply release things, and now he's deploying that obsessive nature to humiliate me in front of our therapist. Daniel, I believe we should concentrate on how you're both experiencing this presently rather than revisiting the past. Sandra interrupts, but he raises a hand. I'm not finished. See, the fascinating aspect is that while Victoria's been sitting here informing you she wants to repair our marriage, she's been continuing to see him. Phone records don't fabricate. He slides a stack of documents across the surface to me. Our phone statement with Marcus's number highlighted in yellow on dozens of calls over the past 4 months. You've contacted him 53 times since you assured me you'd sever contact. 53 times you looked me directly in the eyes and deceived me. That's when he reaches into his jacket and retrieves another set of documents. Whispers even before he slides them across the surface, I recognize what they are. Divorce documents. My voice emerges as barely audible. I'm finished, Victoria. I provided you an opportunity to be honest, to genuinely work on our marriage, and instead you continued deceiving me to my face while sneaking around behind my back. The divorce documents feel substantial in my hands, like they're constructed of lead instead of paper. I glance at Sandra, hoping she'll step in, inform him he's being impulsive, but she's simply sitting there with this impartial expression that communicates she believes he's making the correct decision. And hey, if you're still with me at this point in the story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below, which also helps small creators like me. It genuinely means everything and keeps these stories coming. Now, back to what happened next. This entire session was just performance for you, wasn't it? An opportunity to appear like the rational one while making me appear like the antagonist. You made yourself appear like the antagonist when you selected to keep deceiving me for 4 months straight. I never intended for things to become this complicated. With a hint of desperation, I simply wanted to feel alive again, to remember what it was like to be desired by someone who didn't take me for granted. So rather than discussing with me about feeling taken for granted, you decided to conduct an affair. It wasn't intended to be an affair. It was intended to be a friendship. Sarcastically, but you were so domineering and suspicious that I couldn't even have that without you interrogating me about every conversation. Even as the words escape my mouth, I recognize how feeble they sound. Short pause. But I can't prevent myself from attempting to make him comprehend that this isn't completely my responsibility. A friendship that incorporated motel rooms. That occurred naturally. Things progressed. Things progressed because you selected to allow them to progress. You selected to meet him privately. You selected to lie to me about your destination. You selected to erase his messages so I wouldn't discover them. The remainder of the session is a blur of me attempting to justify myself while Daniel systematically demolishes every rationalization I present. By the conclusion, I'm weeping. Whispers not because I'm remorseful, but because I'm frustrated that he's portraying me as this horrible person when the reality is so much more nuanced. When we exit the therapist's office, I seize his hand in the parking area, making one final attempt to salvage something from this catastrophe. Daniel, please, we can navigate through this. I'll do whatever you require. He withdraws his hand and observes me with this expression I've never witnessed before. Not fury, not pain, just done. I don't want you to do anything, Victoria. I want you removed from my life. What about the children? What about Sophia and Ethan? They'll be fine. Better than fine, actually, once they don't have to observe their parents pretending to care for each other anymore. He enters his vehicle and drives away, abandoning me standing in the parking area, clutching divorce documents, and attempting to comprehend how everything deteriorated so catastrophically, so rapidly. But I'm not surrendering yet. If Daniel wants to play aggressively, then I'll demonstrate to him what that genuinely resembles. My first destination is my parents' residence, because I require supporters in this battle, and they've always been on my side regarding marriage difficulties. Sarcastically, except when I arrive at their house and explain what occurred, their reaction isn't what I anticipated at all. "You've been conducting an affair?" my mother, Patricia, inquires, her voice barely above a murmur. "It's not that straightforward, Mom. Daniel's been impossible to coexist with. He's controlling and paranoid. And so you betrayed your husband instead of attempting to resolve things?" "We attempted resolving things. We've been in counseling for months." "While you were still seeing this other man?" my father, Richard, points out. "That's not... Look, relationships are complex. You can't simply reduce everything to right and wrong. But I observe in their expressions that they already have." My mother begins weeping. She's always been theatrical like that, while my father simply sits there with this disappointed look that makes me want to scream. What destroys me is that none of you are inquiring about my perspective of the situation. You don't want to hear about how isolated I've been, how Daniel's intensity made me feel like I was suffocating in my own existence. "We're listening now," my father states quietly. So I inform them everything about how Daniel became fixated with knowing my location every minute of every day, about how he'd analyze every conversation I had with other people, searching for concealed meanings that weren't there, about how Marcus made me feel appreciated and valued in ways I hadn't felt in years. I didn't intend to conduct an affair. I simply wanted to feel like myself again, instead of like some captive in my own marriage. But even as I'm explaining it, I can observe that they're not truly hearing me. They're fixated on the reality that I deceived and snuck around, not on the reasons why I felt like I had to. "Victoria, sweetheart," my mother says, "marriage is challenging work. It requires sacrifice and dedication, not escaping to someone else when things become difficult." I wasn't escaping to someone else. I was attempting to survive in a marriage that was gradually destroying my spirit. "Then you should have obtained counseling or separated," my father says, "not initiated a relationship with another married man." The judgment in his voice is unmistakable, and I realize that arriving here was an error. They're going to side with Daniel just like everyone else, because it's simpler to portray me as the villain than to acknowledge that perhaps there were difficulties in my marriage that contributed to this situation. 25 minutes later, there's a knock on the entrance, and my stomach drops when my father opens it to reveal Daniel standing on the doorstep. "I hope you don't object to me stopping by," he says to my parents. "I wanted to discuss with you about what's occurring with Victoria and me." "Of course, enter," my mother says, sarcastically, and I observe in horror as my own parents welcome my soon-to-be ex-husband into their living room like he's their son instead of me being their daughter. What follows is the most humiliating hour of my existence. Daniel sits there calmly explaining his version of events while my parents nod along sympathetically. He tells them about employing the private investigator, about discovering the motel receipts, about providing me multiple opportunities to be honest. He wants to understand that I don't blame Victoria entirely, he says, and I want to hurl something at his head for the fake magnanimity. Marriage difficulties are usually both people's responsibility, but the deception and the continued dishonesty after I discovered, I can't move past that. We're so apologetic this occurred to you, my mother says, actually reaching over to squeeze his hand. You're handling this with such grace. Grace? He's systematically destroying my reputation, and they believe he's being graceful about it. I also want you to understand that I'm not going to speak negatively about Victoria to our friends or spread this around town. The children don't need to mature hearing negative things about their mother. It's such a manipulative maneuver. He gets to appear like the bigger person while ensuring everyone knows precisely why our marriage is terminating. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there being portrayed as this selfish woman who discarded her family for some fling. What about custody? My father asks. I'm hoping we can resolve that amicably. The children need their mother, even if she and I can't be married anymore. Even his generosity feels like an insult. He's being so reasonable and mature, while I'm the one who appears like an emotional disaster who can't handle adult conversations. After he departs, my parents turn to me with these expressions that make it clear whose side they're on. He's a good man, Victoria, my mother says. I hope you realize what you're surrendering. I'm not surrendering anything. He's the one filing for divorce. Because you conducted an affair. Because he couldn't handle the reality that I needed something he wasn't providing me. But I can observe it's pointless. They've already determined who's right and who's wrong in this situation, and it's not going to be me. The subsequent few weeks transform into a nightmare of logistics and shame. Daniel changes the locks on our residence and terminates my access to our joint bank accounts, compelling me to relocate back in with my parents like I'm some kind of teenager who was caught sneaking out. The worst aspect is dealing with Sophia and Ethan, attempting to explain why Mommy doesn't reside at home anymore without making Daddy appear bad. Daniel, of course, handles it perfectly. He's always been excellent with the children, patient in ways that used to irritate me but now just make me appear worse by comparison. When are you returning home, Mommy? Sophia asks during one of our supervised visits at the park. I'm uncertain, baby. Daddy and I are resolving some things. Are you getting divorced like Tommy's parents? The reality that she even knows that word breaks my heart. We're just taking a break from residing in the same house presently, but I can observe the confusion in both their expressions, and I don't know how to explain that sometimes adults make mistakes that have larger consequences than they anticipated. The absolute worst moment arrives when I encounter Rebecca at the grocery store. Marcus's wife apparently decided that confronting me in public was appropriate behavior. You have some audacity showing your face around here, she says, loud enough for other shoppers to hear. Rebecca, I don't want any confrontation. You should have considered that before you decided to destroy 2 families. I didn't destroy anything. Marcus was just as involved in this as I was. Marcus informed me everything. How you pursued him, how you wouldn't accept rejection, how you threatened to inform me about your friendship if he didn't meet you privately. The fabrications are so outrageous that I can't even process them initially. That's not what occurred at all. He showed me the messages. Victoria, I witnessed how you manipulated him into feeling sympathetic for you, how you used your marriage difficulties to make him think you needed rescuing. I want to inform her that her precious husband was the one who suggested the motel encounters, who told me he loved me, who discussed leaving her for months. But I can observe from the crowd of people pretending not to listen that this isn't the time or place. Your husband is a fabricator, I finally managed to state. My husband is home with our children presently, working on our marriage instead of running around town attempting to destroy other people's families. She walks away, abandoning me standing in the cereal aisle, feeling like everyone in the store is staring at me. The humiliation is overwhelming, but what makes it worse is knowing that this is probably just the beginning. In a town this size, information travels rapidly, and apparently the information is that I'm some kind of predator who seduced an innocent married man. 9 months later, I'm sitting in a cramped apartment that I can barely afford on my salary, scrolling through social media and torturing myself with updates from my old existence. Daniel's posts appear in my feed occasionally, pictures of him with the children at soccer games or school events, appearing relaxed and genuinely content in ways that make my stomach twist with something I don't want to identify. The house appears better in the background of his photos than it ever did when I resided there. He's painted the kitchen, updated the landscaping, and generally seems to be flourishing in ways that make me question everything I thought I knew about our marriage. The children appear happy too, which should make me glad, but instead just makes me feel worse about my limited custody arrangement. Every other weekend and one evening weekly isn't sufficient time to maintain the kind of relationship I want with Sophia and Ethan, but it's what the court decided was appropriate given the circumstances. My own social existence has basically evaporated. Most of our couple friends sided with Daniel, probably because he handled the entire divorce so maturely. The few single friends I have remaining are exhausted from hearing me discuss how unjust everything has been, and dating feels impossible when you're a divorced mother with a reputation. The final insult arrives when I observe a social media post about Marcus and Rebecca renewing their vows on their 11th wedding anniversary. The photos show them appearing happy and in love, surrounded by friends and family celebrating their journey through difficult times and their commitment to fighting for their marriage. So while everyone else obtains their redemption narrative, I'm left with the reality that I traded a stable existence with a man who, despite his intensity and controlling tendencies, genuinely loved me and our children for a fantasy that was never authentic to begin with. But even now, even facing the wreckage of everything I once possessed, I can't bring myself to admit that this is entirely my responsibility. There were real difficulties in my marriage that nobody wants to acknowledge. I had needs that weren't being satisfied, and sometimes people make imperfect choices when they're attempting to search for happiness and connection. The truth is, Daniel's controlling behavior and constant suspicion created an environment where I felt like I had to conceal parts of myself just to have any peace. Marcus offered me something I wasn't obtaining at home: appreciation, understanding, and the sensation of being desired for who I really am instead of criticized for every little thing. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I should have been more forthright about my feelings instead of seeking connection elsewhere. But the reality that everyone wants to portray me as the villain in this story just shows how little they understand about the complexity of human relationships and the courage it takes to pursue what you really want, even when it comes at a cost. I'm not the monster they've all made me out to be. I'm just a woman who wanted to feel alive again, who wanted to be seen and valued by someone who didn't take her for granted. If that makes me selfish, then perhaps I can exist with being selfish. At least I know I attempted to find something real, even if it didn't work out the way I hoped. At least I tried.